Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor. And yesterday we had a very important congressional hearing, but it wasn't here in Washington, D.C. It was out in Representative Darrell Issa's district, Escondido, California, and it featured Gold Star families whose children, loved ones, husbands were killed in Afghanistan in the final days due to President Joe Biden's disastrous pullout. You remember it well. And of course, under Nancy Pelosi, when the Democrats had the majority in the House of Representatives, well, they didn't have any hearings really to unpack what happened, and certainly not to give these family members a voice to express exactly how they felt about the events. Well, now that we have Republicans in the majority, this is the kind of hearing we have. And the mainstream media, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, they ignored this story. So, well, there's a reason why you don't watch them. There's a reason why you're here. We're actually going to spend a little time on this. They deserve no less. This is Gold Star father Darren Hoover talking about his son, Marine Darren Taylor Hoover. Please watch.
To have the ambassador to Afghanistan changed out midway through all of this should be a huge red flag. Why was that done? Because the prior ambassador was not on board with the decisions being made and the way it was being handled? If that's the case, then something needs to be done. In closing, I'm calling out Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, General Milley, General McKenzie, Lieutenant Colonel Whitehead, who could not give the order to the snipers to take out the bomber before he detonated his vest, and ultimately the president. Do what our son did. Be a grown-ass man. Admit to your mistakes. Learn from them so that this doesn't happen ever again. You all need to resign immediately. Our sons and daughters have more integrity in their little toes than every one of them combined. You owe it to our families here today, to the other Gold and Silver Star families that have gone before, and most of all to the veterans who have given so much for this country so that we have the freedoms that we enjoy today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well said. And of course, neither Secretary Austin or General Milley or Secretary Blinken, and certainly not the President of the United States, have resigned, let alone admit mistakes, let alone even acknowledge, really, these 13 service members who died due to their negligence, due to their miscalculations, due to their ineptness. In fact, the last time we saw President Biden have anything to do with these fallen heroes was when he was in Dover watching the dignified transfer of their remains. He checked his watch when the flag-draped coffins went by. You think that's bad? It actually gets worse. This is Gold Star mother Cheryl Rex. She's the mother of fallen Marine Lance Corporal Dylan Merola. Listen.
When Joe Biden, our elected president, entered the room, when he approached me, his words to me were, my wife Jill and I know how you feel. We lost our son as well and brought him home in a flag-draped coffin. My heart started beating faster, and I started shaking, knowing that their son died from cancer and they were able to be by his side. Also wondering how someone could honestly, be so heartless to say he knew how I felt a little over 24 hours and learning of my son's death. After this encounter, I have never had any personal correspondence, nor has my son been honored or his name spoken by this commander-in-chief or his administration.
Yeah, Joe Biden saying, I know how you feel. No, Joe Biden is not a Gold Star father. You know how I know that? Because he's not a Gold Star father. He claims that his son, Beau Biden, the former Attorney General of Delaware, is a victim of the Iraq War. He died of cancer. They may claim that he contracted the cancer while he was serving in Iraq, but that doesn't make him a Gold Star father. There was no flag-draped coffin that got flown in from Iraq. It's despicable. This man has to make it all about himself. I mentioned the broadcast media didn't cover any of this, and they didn't. Here's the cover of the New York Times this morning. There's a whole lot in there about Ukraine, the president's latest debacle, but I know it's hard to see. I assure you, not one mention anywhere on the front page of these Gold Star parents. And there's no mention in any of the subsequent pages either. A news blackout. They don't want to cover this story, which is kind of remarkable, you see, because I'm old enough to remember Cindy Sheehan. I bet you remember Cindy Sheehan too. Her son was killed in Iraq, killed in action when President Bush was in the White House. She set up camp outside his home in Texas, and she became a media celebrity. She was on television every day. But that's because George Bush was president. He's a Republican. Let's not forget the Khan family. Their child also died in the Afghan conflict. And, well, when President Trump was running for office, they became celebrities. They became a cause. They became political tools to be used. The Democrats and the media, they don't really care about Gold Star parents. Clearly, they only look to use them as a cudgel, as a weapon, as a way to hurt Republicans. Otherwise, you would see these Gold Star family stories told every night, and you won't, because it hurts their guy. Let's leave you now with Alicia Lopez, mother of fallen Marine Corporal Hunter Lopez. She had a very important moment at this hearing as well. Pay attention, please.
I ask that our children are honored, those injured, and those that made it home from HKIA. That they be honored by speaking the truth. Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, Sergeant Nicole G., Sergeant Johanny Pichardo, Staff Sergeant Ryan Naus, Corporal Dagan Page, Corporal Humberto Sanchez, Corporal Hunter Lopez, Hospital Corpsman Maxton Soviak, Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Lance Corporal Jared Schmidt, Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Lance Corporal Riley McCullum.
We won't forget, nor should we. Those families deserve better. They deserve attention. They deserve to have their stories told. And they deserve a commander-in-chief who is close to being worthy of that office. We have nothing near with Joe Biden. I'm sure he's checking his watch as we speak. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. Keep it here. It's Salem News Channel. The latest round of legal wrangling involving former President Donald Trump is obviously a very serious legal concern for the former president. But what about the politics of it? If anything, he seems to get a boost every time he's indicted. And that continued after last week's special counsel indictment regarding the aftermath of the 2020 election. What's that all about? And how is this presidential nomination process going to unfold beginning 2 weeks from now, the very first debate in Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Well, let's go to Wisconsin. Former Governor Scott Walker, who is now the president of Young America's Foundation, you'll be hosting that debate in Milwaukee. So I guess you're all fired up and ready to go.
We are. It's going to be a great debate. I'm proud that Young America's Foundation is a partner with that. I'll literally give the welcome on the stage that night. It'll be nice, unlike 8 years ago, to actually be on the stage and not have to be worried about being under the spotlight, just giving a welcome. But I expect there'll be a lot of fireworks and a lot of interesting discussion.
What do you make of the polling I just cited? Once again, I mean, President Trump, he's now extended his lead in New Hampshire. He's got extended his lead nationally. Latest poll going head to head against Joe Biden, he's winning head to head on a national poll. What do you make of that reaction to these indictments? Normally, that would be bad for a candidate.
Right. Well, I think of two words. I think of family and forward. Let me explain what I mean by both. In the primary, when it comes to primary voters, it's family. It's one of those where even if Donald Trump wasn't necessarily your first pick in 2024, I think most Republicans can see, regardless of who their pick is, that this is political rancor. This is out of control. This is more of the same thing that we've seen attacking Donald Trump. And so like a family, people tend to surround their family when they're in trouble. And the same thing's true of Donald Trump. They can see through this and they're outraged. What the interesting part about it, though, is what you just mentioned. Beyond just the primary polling, it's the general election polling in states like mine that matters. And that's where I say going forward, a critical mistake Republicans made in the 2022 cycle was spending too much time talking about the 2020 election instead of saying, what are you going to do going forward? That's what swing voters want in battleground states. And as long as liberals are focused on things in the past, that gives Donald Trump and others a chance to say, what are they going to do going forward? And that's a benefit for him.
Oh, so if anything, the Democrats bringing these charges against President Trump 3 years after the events of January 6th actually mires them down because it looks like they're obsessed with the 2020 election.
Absolutely. In the battleground states, I remember Chuck Todd was in Waukesha, Wisconsin with me not long ago, and he kept talking about January 6th. And I said, I defy you to walk around this park and find one person who gives a rip about January 6th today. They might have back then, but today they're more worried about their gas tank, about their grocery bill, about their tax burden, and about securing the border so fentanyl doesn't show up in their backyard when their kids or grandkids.
Let's take a look at a brand new ad. It just hit today. This is coming from one of President Trump's super PACs supporting him. Let's see it.
Hey, Joe. How come your Justice Department goes after Trump endlessly, yet they cover for your family? Hunter's laptop? Yeah, that was censored, but we know that laptop's real. And it's not just filled with photos of Hunter's drug-fueled debauchery either. Nah, it showed Hunter pocketed millions from foreign partners, cash from Ukrainian and Chinese interests accused of bribery and fraud. And remember when you claimed your family never made money from China? Well, Hunter admitted in court he took their cash. His Chinese business partner was tied to the Communist Party. How did Hunter's partners get meetings at the White House? Your brother, grandkids, even nieces and nephews.
You get the picture. This is President Trump basically saying, wait, no, you're the corrupt guy. Now, I think this does work for the primaries, Governor Walker, but do Republicans or President Trump in particular here fall into a trap of sort of talking about things other than the economy? I think it's a big issue if the president is corrupt and he's lied about it, but it doesn't bring the price of gas down.
No, but you got to do the two hand in hand. I think you can have a dual track. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think it is powerful because the left assumes that swing voters are all obsessed about Donald Trump and his personality. They're assumed about January 6th and things of that matter. I think that this ad and this line of logic flips the script and says, this is why they're focused on. This is why they're doing it. They want to draw attention away from the real corruption that's happening with Joe Biden and his family. And I think you do that suddenly. I always say the best political arguments are the ones that people go damn straight. Now you go, oh, damn straight. I get why they're doing this. Then he's got to pivot and make the case about making for a better economy, which is what he had during his time as president of the United States.
And also, if people are getting their news from the New York Times, Washington Post, or broadcast news channels, God forbid, everything in that ad will be a revelation to them because it's not being reported in other parts of the media.
Well, exactly. I mean, the laptop alone, we can see in the polling that had many Americans, not all, but many Americans known more about that. That would have directly influenced their vote in the 2020 election. This is not about going back, but rather explaining why are they so obsessed with it. They're covering up for their problems that you have with Joe Biden and Hunter and his entire family out there. Our friend Peter Schweitzer's talked extensively about this in the great book Red-Handed. This ad and this line of logic, I think, goes a long way towards getting independent swing voters to go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Then you got to come to them and tell them what you're going to do to make America better going forward.
So let's focus on this debate that we were talking about. Like I said, it's August 23rd in Milwaukee, co-hosted between Fox News and Young America's Foundation, the group that you lead as the president. You alluded to the fact that you were on that stage 8 years ago, and you were, well, let's face it, all the candidates had to deal with that giant elephant in the room, Donald Trump, and we know how that election went. What's your advice to a Ron DeSantis or a Vivek Ramaswamy or further on the outskirts, some of the candidates who are really going to have to vie for time? How do they do it?
Well, I think the best advice I can give is ignore the Washington consultants. That was my biggest mistake, although I think even if I acted differently, it was Donald Trump's time for sure. I was the smart one. I got out before I got a nickname. But in the end, I think if they're going to have any possibility, they've got to go out there and be bold and be aggressive and don't, just run on your record. That's the problem I had 8 years ago. I had a great record to run on, but that's not enough. That gets you on the stage. So if you're Ron DeSantis or some of the others, your record gets you on the stage. But now you got to tell them about how you're going to translate that into being a bold and transformational president and how you're better situated to do that than someone who did it for 4 years.
From my position as a broadcaster and somebody who observes and analyzes politics, I want President Trump on that stage. I think that the voters deserve to see all of the candidates going at it, and I think he should show up. That said, whenever I talk to anyone who's in the business of winning elections, they all are unanimous. They don't think President Trump has anything to gain by showing up at this debate and everything to lose. What do you think?
Well, that is conventional wisdom for sure. But Donald Trump's never been a conventional candidate. This guy has always been cutting edge. People have always written him off. They've always told him to do things, and he's done things his way, completely different than all of that. So I think he actually is well served to be on the debate stage. I think if he comes in and does what he did 8 years ago in those first two, in particular, those first two debates, the one in Cleveland and the one at the Reagan Library. So it's queued up the same way, the one in the convention city of Milwaukee and the next one after that's in the library. If he comes in and dominates those debates, it's over. It is over. The only chance the other candidates have is if somehow he either comes and slips up, which I don't see happening, or if he doesn't show up and they're able to turn that and say, well, maybe he's afraid to defend his positions here, and they can make some inroads. So I think he's actually in a better position if he shows up and tries to dominate, which he's done before.
Finally, Governor Walker, I've heard you make the case that Generation Z, those students that are in college and up into their upper 20s, that's the key to electoral victory going forward. And I'm astounded by the crowds you draw when you do events on campuses. Do you have any tangible understanding that those crowds and the activity amongst conservatives on campuses is actually translating into votes?
Yeah, well, for starters, we're seeing the campus lectures in particular. We have over 1 billion views on our YouTube site. We've got almost 1.5 million subscribers. That's the way to do what Ronald Reagan did decades ago. And that is he bypassed the media and went out in the stump and used the bully pulpit. In our case, it's now bypassing many of the media, corporate media elites, and going directly to young people on their devices. When we make inroads there, it makes a difference. We just saw a report this last week that showed high school young men and their high school age are actually becoming more conservative. We need to counter the radicalization that we see in college campuses and schools, on digital media and so forth. When we do, we don't have to win them. We don't have to have a solid majority. We just have to make some inroads. We can't get slaughtered like we did in the 2022 election. Yeah,
we got to do better. That's for sure. Governor Scott Walker, Young America's Foundation in Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel. Well, if you're like me, you probably still feel a little bit of metaphorical whiplash as we are still headfirst into this transgender agenda and activism. And you look around and it's like, where did all this come from? It was like 5 minutes ago when it was ridiculous to think that a biological male would intrude on a girl's private space, where a 14-year-old girl in her high school would be exposed against her will and against her consent to male genitalia. But now you need to accept it or you're a bigot. How did we get here? Where did it come from? Well, joining us right now is somebody who might be able to shed a little light on it. She's Jamie Mitchell. She's the founder and president of Gays Against Groomers. And I know I sound like an old cis white male Christian yelling about these things, but I'm not the only one, Jamie. This is like, where did all this come from?
Well, I think that it has to do with oppression and victimhood being very powerful in this country. I'm not really sure. After we won our rights, which were hard fought, and just, we won the right to get married and have the same rights as every other American in this country. And then, as far as I'm concerned, we should have packed it up and gone home and just gone about living our lives. That's what I wanted to do. That's what everybody in Gays Against Groomers wanted to do, and the millions of LGBT people that we represent. But the radicals seem to have a different agenda, and
Yeah.
nobody had a problem with gay people, with trans people, until they started. They crossed the red line and started attacking children, and also going after women's spaces and erasing them, essentially. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
very disturbing.
I think it's very noteworthy that you just said LGB. You didn't include all the other letters that now come after it, and I've always wondered about that. I've worked with and been friends with and family members with gay men and women my entire life. Most people our generation now have, and the people that I know who are gay or lesbian, they don't have anything in common with people who are transgender. It's a very different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mindset that they should have never been lumped in together. Being gay, being LGB is who you love, being T is who you are or who you believe you are. They're really not relatable in any way or
Yeah.
similar. But they lump us all together, and that you can see a big pushback happening for the divorce now. So, essentially divorcing the T. But, there are transsexual people that also agree with what we're doing. We have a few in our organization, but,
Yes.
overall, I don't believe that they belong grouped together. No.
I've seen that, and by the way, it's a good moment to say we're not talking about individuals here necessarily. We're talking about the movement. We're talking about the activists. We're talking about the people who use this issue for political power. And is that kind of what happened? There are a lot. I mean, you sort of alluded to it. There are a lot of very well-funded gay rights, lesbian rights organizations who, as you put it, won hard-fought battles. It's not like they're going to disband. There's a lot of money in activism. Did they sort of transition, if I may say, to supporting trans rights now because that's just the business?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, that's a big cash cow. You can't just pack it up and go home. There's no money in that. So
Yeah.
there's always, new ways to figure out how to say you're oppressed, even though that's not true. Or the big lie right now is that there's some sort of trans genocide happening, and I think that goes hand in hand with the radical extremism that you see from these trans activists. If you're being told that your people are being wiped out and killed and genocided, what wouldn't you do to stop that? So,
Right.
I think that we're at a boiling point in this culture war, and I remain hopeful. Even though they're insane and things seem to be getting worse, at the same time, things are getting better. I mean, Gays Against Groomers has assisted in passing 19 states passing child protection laws that outlaw child sterilization and mutilation. So, it's a
That's
battle, but I think that we will win it in the end.
I agree. I think that the victories of the last 6 months, not just in public opinion, but very real legislative victories, have been incredible, and the pendulum is swinging. Thanks in part to your group's work. I want to talk about the group because even the name of your group, for some reason, people get angry and they get, what's controversial about being gay and against groomers? First of all, I'm told that there's no such thing as a groomer, that it's a disparaging remark, that it's an insult, it's a myth. Is that so, or is there a real basis here for being worried about the attempted grooming of children who are not able to give consent?
Oh no, it's very real, and I take I have a big problem with people saying that groomer is an anti-LGBTQ slur. I think that is an admission that all of us are aligned with the attack on children, and all of us are participating in it, which is not true. I think that labeling groomer an anti-LGBTQ slur is actually doing more harm to our community, because everybody should speak out against what's happening to these children. And I actually
Mm.
do find that this is the most uniting cause on earth. But no, obviously obviously there's grooming going on, and you don't have to, grooming isn't always sexual. It can be an ideological grooming, which we see in the schools. It could be grooming by these therapists and doctors to medicalize these children very young, to have them permanently hooked up to the medical industrial complex. And it's very sad. And no, I knew when I came up with the name Gays Against Groomers, I knew it was going to get a lot of attention. It's pretty fiery. I knew that we'd be facing that. But we get a lot of hate, and I would think that we weren't being effective enough if that wasn't the case. So I'm happy about it. I don't mind it.
We like fiery and provocative here. It gets people's attention, and attention needs to be paid. Now, activists will say this. They'll say, listen, a lot of these feelings, a lot of these attractions, a lot of these questions of identity, it happens when you're a child. It happens as you're getting into adolescence. These children are afraid they'll be demonized or abused or abandoned by their parents. So we're not grooming them. We're just trying to give them support in a safe environment to explore themselves and explore what their attractions are, whatever it is. I mean, is there some basis for that?
No, I don't think so. There's one way to teach acceptance. You can just say some families look different, and that's okay. But what we see now happening in schools is, you've seen a lot of these books. They're literal pornography being put in these schools for children. And that doesn't teach inclusivity. And I think that that's really insulting to us as gays and lesbians. I mean, why not highlight some doctors, gay doctors or gay lawyers or just upstanding citizens of society and show that, no matter who you love, you're equal, you're just the same as everybody else. And that should really be the end of the discussion, especially in schools. But we see them, these teachers decorating their entire classroom with the rainbow. And, it's becoming almost trendy. It's becoming like the punk rock of decades ago. Or gothic, the goth phase, except these kids, when they go through these phases, they're being hooked up to the medical industry, and their lives are being destroyed. You see the detransitioner wave right now, and that's going to continue to happen. It's so sad. People like Chloe Cole and many others who were medicalized as youth that changed their mind, because shocker, kids go through phases and change their mind all the time. No child can consent, and no child can make permanent decisions, especially about, their bodies. So
one other aspect of this that I'd love to explore with you as a gay woman, as a lesbian, and that I'm reading studies that show that a lot of these young girls who are being pushed down this path of gender transition, they're really probably just gay. They're just lesbian, but in some way that's looked down upon. That's not as cool. It's even not as acceptable for some reason because of all of the focus on transgenderism. Do you have an opinion about that?
I do. As you can see, my hoodie says "Save the Tomboys." That's like one of our main campaigns because they're being eradicated. I'm a tomboy. I grew up. I wear men's clothes. I've always been a tomboy. Not a day in my life did I want to be a man or a boy. And the issue is that we see a lot of these kids. We see ourselves in these children right now because gender nonconformity is very large within the gay demographic, gay population. It's okay. It's interesting because this new trans movement is kind of bringing us back to the point of rigid gender stereotypes, which gays and lesbians, kind of fought to dismantle for a long time, because it is okay to be a more butch or a more masculine woman. It's okay to be a feminine boy or a man. That doesn't mean that you need to get yourself on chemical castration drugs and hormones and have surgeries. It's just ridiculous. And I think it's incredibly evil to tell children that, that if a little girl happens to like playing with the boys or playing sports more than playing with Barbies and wearing dresses, that she's actually born in the wrong body. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
It is, and it's sad. And I can tell you, as a straight man who loves Broadway show tunes, I'm all in for gender nonconformity. Thank you for joining us. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. There are viral videos, and there are really viral videos. And about 4 weeks ago, a video taken from an American Airlines flight really went supernova. I'm sure you know what we're talking about. It's this one.
Say whatever you want. I'm telling you, I'm getting the off, and there's a reason why I'm getting the off, and everyone can either believe it or they cannot believe it. I don't give two But I am telling you right now, that motherfucker back there is not real. And you can sit on this plane and you can die with them or not. I'm not going to. Bye.
I don't know why, but I experience so much joy when I see that video. Now, this woman got off the plane and claimed that she was sitting next to a lizard person. That's quite a mystery, and we're still trying to exactly figure out what she was talking about. I think we do understand that she had a glass of Chardonnay or two before she got on the plane. That said, the video also took fire because no one knew who she was. This woman was a mystery. Usually, when a video like this hits on the internet or pictures on the internet, people know within a day or two exactly who the person is. Well, we now know who she is, and we know who she is thanks to the work of a very tireless journalist. She is Bree Dale, Rome correspondent for the Daily Wire. Her breedale.substack.com is where her readers learned on July 22nd the identity of this person. And now the rest of the media is caught up with you, Bree. Congratulations.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me back.
So who is this mystery woman?
Her name is Tiffany Gomez. She is from Texas. She's 38 years old, an executive in marketing. She owns her own company, really put together, has been listed as one of the top, I think it was 2017, one of the top executives in her field and is recognized as such. So it is interesting that no one seems to have recognized Tiffany, including her colleagues in Texas, which had me thinking, this story may be a little bit deeper than just Tiffany maybe having a glass of Chardonnay. In fact, according to the police report that I received via a FOIA request, because that's how it's done at DFW, there's no mention of Tiffany actually having any substance issues. In fact, the police, Larry, didn't even interview her.
Really? How's that possible? I mean, usually if you disrupt operations on an airplane, that's at the very least there's questioning, if not a full-on arrest for a federal offense. What happened here?
Right, exactly so. And in fact, Larry, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, right out of college, I was a flight attendant with United Airlines for a little gig. It was great travel fun, but there's also very serious federal regulations that flight attendant crews and the pilots have to abide by post 9/11. So when Tiffany makes mention of people dying on a plane and wanting to get off, those are keywords that are taken very seriously. So why wasn't she escorted off the plane? Why were the people who were taken off the plane and the plane security search, why were none of them in the police report? None of them were interviewed. The individual that she claimed threatened her was not detained. And in fact, Larry, according to this police report, Tiffany left the security area inside the airport before they had a chance to interview her. And instead, she went back through TSA with her canceled ticket and was able to re-enter through TSA and try to reboard the plane. So something has occurred here in the way of security. Yeah, lots of security concerns. And then you mentioned federal law as well. She has been charged by two, it looks like misdemeanors. One is a criminal trespassing charge for that reentry, and the other was a conduct in on board, disruptive conduct on board the aircraft. But what about the federal charges?
Right. And listen, Bree, if your investigation has led us to the conclusion that there is in fact a lizard person, look, can we just cut to the chase now? Because I can't. Or is that what we're aiming for here?
No, in fact, what I sought was a little bit more information from the police on whether or not they had interviewed anybody else on the plane, because one would think that if someone has threatened her, they would have they would have detained the person, they would have interviewed anybody on the plane. Yeah. They didn't. So Tiffany is not speaking to the press. It's also very interesting. She is a marketing executive within a few hours, maybe a day of this going viral, she was successful in wiping all of her social media. So it was very difficult to kind of track her down. But I did call her. I left several messages with her, and she is not interested right now in speaking to the press. And I'm guessing it's because she is facing charges.
Yeah, that makes sense then. I got to ask you two aspects of this that I think are again tangential parts of the story, but certainly part of the story. The first is the way the media has handled this. I've seen publications talk about this and reveal, oh, we know who she is now. What do you mean we? You're the one who did all the legwork. You're the first journalist to discover this. You did the FOIA request. You confirmed it. And all these other publications aren't crediting you. That seems a little outside the norm. Is it because you don't work for the New York Times?
That's interesting, because actually the New York Post did this. I had to call out their journalist. I even contacted her on email, and she responded very tersely that she wasn't going to update her reporting. But it does look like the other outlets just simply didn't do their due diligence, and kind of copy and pasted the story. So there's a lot of that out there. That happens. That does tend to happen. But it is important to note that Daily Mail and others, although I don't particularly like how Daily Mail decided to post a photo of her house and her address, I don't believe that that's correct to put personal identifiable information out there. They did source from me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's important because we want to support independent journalism, because some of the best journalism, as is represented by this story, is being done by independent people like you. That was the second question I wanted to ask you. This is a woman who was having a bad day for whatever reason, and it just happened to be caught on video. Why should her identity be exposed? And certainly her home and her address and all of that. That seems like an incredible intrusion, and it doesn't really bring journalistic value.
Right. And it's a really good question. I just really want to make the record straight that when Tiffany was videoed in doing this, she was committing a crime, potentially a felony. When that happens, when you commit a crime, you no longer have a reasonable expectation for privacy at that point.
Okay.
And that video went viral. And therefore, what she did was police record. And that's what I reported on police record. I also wanted to give Tiffany the benefit of the doubt when I did a little bit of background on her, because many people are claiming she was drunk, she was high, she was crazy, all of these things. We don't know that. That's not in the report. And in fact, Tiffany is an upstanding member of her community. And I wanted to present that as the case that clearly she was disturbed by something. And I do think that there were major security holes in the DFW's investigation that need to be rectified.
Absolutely fascinating story, and there's certainly more to it. Well, we appreciate you, Bree Dale, doing the legwork and doing this journalism. And I had no idea you were a flight attendant too. You still do the whole thing with the.
It was great. It was a great job. It was a great job.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Great work as always out of Rome for Daily Wire. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Now, you know, we've covered the scandal surrounding the Joe Biden administration quite a bit here because it's a pretty big story. You know, the president being involved with bribes from foreign leaders and corruption and lies and selling access, all that stuff. It's kind of important, isn't it? But we've often been concerned that the story is a little too confusing. I see this all the time on the broadcast networks and cable news stations. If they dare to talk about this, they'll often say, well, it's a really confusing conspiracy theory. It's got Ukrainian names and Chinese names and Russian names, and it's hard for the American people to understand. Well, I've got good news for you. We found a news report that succinctly tells you exactly what this scandal is all about and why it's so important. Here, take a look.
President Biden may have been caught up in an influence peddling scheme involving his son Hunter.
You have someone close to a politician selling access, potential access, to the President of the United States.
When Biden was vice president, his son Hunter was given a high-paying position on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company. Sources allege Hunter was selling access to his father, which is known as influence peddling.
He goes to Ukraine, hooks up with these people, they pay him a lot of money.
This is selling access, selling influence. I know the president, therefore pay me money.
A system of direct presidential influence peddling unrivaled in modern American politics.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not.
Shortly after, then Vice President Biden threatened to withhold money to Ukraine unless that country's government fired Viktor Shokin, a prosecutor who was investigating Burisma, the company where Hunter Biden worked.
As I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
Biden claimed he wanted Shokin fired due to concerns about corruption, but legal experts say that doesn't pass the smell test.
This dedicated, heartfelt corruption buster. I mean, they really led with that? Does anyone believe that for a second?
Even if he was, it wouldn't excuse the fact that he withheld the money and put in danger our national security and that of Ukraine, an ally.
Is the president taking bribes, for instance, seems like squarely the kind of thing that you want to know?
You could imagine a president taking bribes to end an investigation. Of course, that's against the law.
That's an impeachable offense. Our founders used the words high crimes and misdemeanors. This Ukraine situation is exactly that.
Whether or not this scandal does lead to the president's impeachment, we, the corporate media, will keep relentlessly digging, just as we have been doing all along in our ongoing coverage of this most important story.
Well, as you saw at the beginning, it is satire. That's not a real news report. It's the genius of Bill D'Agostino and his team over at Media Research Center that put a very concise, compelling, and informative report about the Biden scandal, specifically Burisma, in a perfect format and used the words of the media when they were describing fake scandals about Donald Trump. Think of the hours wasted from 2017 through 2020, covering mysterious scandals that didn't exist in the Trump administration, not least of which the Russian collusion hoax. But yes, even the impeachment over his phone call to the president of Ukraine. Now that we know so much about the reality of the Biden family's ties to Ukraine, President Trump's phone call that led to that impeachment was perfectly understandable, if not totally reasonable. So why doesn't the media cover this story more? Is it just because they're Democrats and they're biased, so they want to help their own guy out? Maybe, but I can't imagine that's all it is. Maybe they think that their audiences are so trained at this point to hate Republicans and love Democrats that if they did this story, it would be bad for ratings. It would turn off their viewers. That's possible, because the only viewers for those networks left are viewers who agree with them. But isn't that part of the problem? I mean, journalism, at least at the broadcast network level, it's supposed to be unbiased. It's not supposed to be a Republican television show and a Democrat television show. It's just supposed to be a news show. And, well, they're not reporting the news anymore. They're helping out one side of the political equation, and they're ignoring the other. As my old friend and mentor, Andrew Breitbart, said once, the American media isn't hated by the American people because the media is biased. The American media is hated by the American people because the American media sucks. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.